No Embiid, but the Sixers still find a way over Ja. Steph gets back to his scoring ways, and the Celtics get a monster win versus the Heat. This is Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA, your daily coverage of the NBA and beyond. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network and the co-host of Locked On Nuggets. He's David Ramil. You can find him on Twitter at DRamil13, co-host of Locked On Heat. We got a healthy Monday slate to break down for you on today's show. David, why don't we start with what I think is this was a night overall where a lot of teams that were down guys got wins over teams in much better spots. It was a wonky late January night in the NBA.
Absolutely. And that's the nature of this season, right? A guy steps out unavailable for injury or health and safety protocols, and then somebody steps in a little bit fluky. Miami, that wasn't the case, but against the Memphis Grizzlies, the Philadelphia 76ers were without Joel Embiid, and they got some incredible performances from Tobias Harris. He had 31 points, and Tyrese Maxey in his second season with 33 points, 13 to 23 from the field, coming up big late in the game to help seal the victory in overtime for the 76ers. They advanced to 31-19 on the season. A big game for them. Just finding ways to contribute. Even Andre Drummond had a pretty big game. 16 points for him, 8 of 11 from the floor. Of course, 23 monstrous rebounds, as is Andre Drummond's way. But, just a strong performance from them to remind everybody that, you know what, they're deep, whether they make a trade for Ben Simmons or not, or whatever happens during the course of this regular season. They're still a pretty legitimate contender. I know we've talked about them in the past, but what were your takeaways from this game?
Memphis was able to get fast break points, which the Sixers have a really good transition defense, but the Grizzlies racked up 29 transition points. But Memphis's offense outside of that really struggles. Like that's, to me, is the big thing is everyone's trying to figure out the Grizzlies and whether or not they're a serious threat in the Western Conference. And one of the reasons I've been hesitant is if you kind of dive in and the eye test matches this, is that they're just not great in the half court. And late in this game, when they were just trying to get over the hump, they just couldn't do it. Like the Grizzlies were without Dylan Brooks for sure, but look, you've got all these other guys. You should be able to get it done versus the Sixers without Embiid. And Maxey was great. And Tobias Harris, who's had an awful season, had a really good game tonight. Ja made an incredible play at the end of the game to force overtime. But this is the other thing. It's like you forced overtime. You should have been able to break them then. It's like, all right, we screwed around, but now we're going to actually take care of business. Nope. Sixers come away, make all the plays in overtime, and wind up getting the win. Like, that's a concerning loss, honestly, I think, for Memphis in terms of these are the type of games where if it's tough, you're going to want to win them. I gotta ask where Embiid was, because I feel like he's probably going to be there when they play the Rockets or the Magic or whoever else. And for some reason, he's not here in this one with the rest. It's weird, but
they said it was a scheduled absence, right? Like the doctors had set aside that he wasn't going to be available for tonight's game. He's perfectly capable of this, did not do so. You have concerns about that? You think there's something fishy about that?
No, I don't think it's weird. I just think let me put it this way. One of my guys over the Action Network noted that Embiid has not scored over 21 points versus Steven Adams in quite a while. And I just think it's weird that like he dominates the bad teams, but it's weird that that his rest schedule sometimes is perplexing to me. But like you said, the Sixers team I think is good. I think the Sixers team is deep and it's good, and they play together. Drummond gave them a lot tonight. It was a quality win.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's all you can take, right? I mean, Memphis playing significantly better than the Sixers, I think, of late, but still, the Sixers finding a way to come away with a victory without Joel Embiid there. I think that just speaks about this incredible depth and the fact that they were able to find contributions. Maybe depth isn't the right word, because Tobias Harris is so hit and miss. But on a night like tonight, when he's coming up as big as he does, the Sixers certainly look much more dominant than your average team.
So I didn't catch this one. Catch me up on, because I knew you would be on top of it. Catch me up on Heat Celtics and how that one went down, because No Kyle Lowry. He's still out with personal reasons. No Jimmy Butler in this one. And the Heat, who have been really good in these spots, and the Celtics, who have been so uneven, did not see the end result of this one coming. How'd that one shake out?
Pretty badly for the Heat. They started off really slow, as you would imagine, with 3 starters out of the lineup. It wasn't much better over on the Celtics side. They were a little bit sluggish, but they started to get key contributions from Jaylen Brown, who finished with 29 points to lead the Celtics. Overall, then the Heat found a way to come back. They strung together some good performances from Max Strus. He had a career high 27 points. Normally a bench player, but another guy who has been able to be plugged and played in there by Eric Spoelstra, and he comes up big with 9 of 17 shooting from the perimeter. They tied the game at 32, but eventually the Celtics just started pulling away. They closed the first half with a 9-point lead, and in the third quarter, Bam Adebayo picked up a fourth quarter. Duncan Robinson was a miserable 2 of 8 from the floor. Haven't been able to get consistent production from him all season long, really. He had a couple great games and a couple of not so great games, and it looks like it's just been an up and down season for him. But unfortunately, then the Celtics just wound up pulling away. The Heat, after a triple overtime loss to the Toronto Raptors on Saturday, just didn't have the energy. They didn't have the horsepower. They didn't have anything, and they just completely fell apart. Eventually, the Celtics wound up blowing them out with a 30-point win, 122-92. That wasn't even this close, to be honest with you. It looked like it could have been a 40-point loss or even higher the way they played. And you have to chalk it up. As bad as the Heat were, the Celtics were actually really, really good defensively, just making things very difficult for a team without any energy or without their best players in Miami, and weren't able to get the kind of production you might want from either Tyler Hero or Bam Adebayo. Boston just found a way to step up, doing everything defensively to challenge guys like Bam and Hero. Just maybe sticking to Duncan a little bit more, targeting him on defense. He got into foul trouble early on. So you have to acknowledge that the Celtics are a really good team, as inconsistent as they've been. I believe they're currently the 8th seed right now in the standings, or 8th or 9th seed. But either way, still a dangerous team, just based on the fact that their defense is as good as it is. Miami shot terribly overall, and just wasn't able to mount any kind of consistent offense most of the game.
Boston goes to 17 and 10 at home, which I thought was surprising given how their losses have been kind of catastrophic this season. They are 10 and 15 on the road, so they got to get better in those spots. But I mean, they're kind of starting to get it together a little bit. I'm sure we can hear more about this on Locked On Heat. I know you did an episode on it a couple weeks ago, but I did want to ask you, do you think that what do you think the chances are that Duncan Robinson gets moved in the next 10 days?
I don't think it's high. I think they still have faith in what he can provide, even though Strus has been arguably more consistent than he has been in more limited opportunities. And I think the return of what you're going to get on a Duncan Robinson trade probably isn't enough to. I think it's more of an offseason deal, if anything. I think they signed a deal with Duncan on both sides, probably knowing that he wasn't going to be able to outlast it in Miami, because it's a manageable deal. This is the way that Miami has been operating over the last couple of years, where they signed guys like Kelly Olynyk, James Johnson, Dion Waiters, all those contracts. As bad as they looked, from in a vacuum, they were at least movable. And Duncan's is somewhere along those lines, even though he struggled to some degree this year. I just don't think you can trade him for anything that's a significant upgrade. And why not keep one of Miami's greatest strengths all year has been their depth. And, whether it's Max Strus going off or Tyler Hero going off in the perimeter, or Duncan, you want to have those options come playoff time. So even though he is a slight liability on defense, he's still better defensively than Max Strus is, although a large swath of fans seem to disagree with that notion. I think he's better defensively than Strus is, just in terms of team defense, but he's still so foul prone but despite all the limitations, he still gives them something. Like, he can still go from 7 of 9 on any given night. And so that's a dangerous weapon to have. And there's always the gravity factor with a shooter like Robinson too.
Well, I mean, hey, maybe his playoffs will be great, because his regular season, I don't think, could be much worse given his profile. Let's move on, and real quickly before we go to break here, let's talk about Knicks and Kings. This was a blowout from the start. Knicks just roll in this one. No De'Aaron Fox for the Kings. I kind of was curious to see what would happen with Davion Mitchell in the starting unit. He goes 8 of 17 for 18 points. Another strong game for Tyrese Haliburton, with 21 points on 7 of 16 and 8 assists. Haliburton's turning into a really, really good player. But the Knicks just honestly had it rolling. Alec Burks goes for 21. Showcase game maybe for him in trade talks. The price for him apparently in trade talks is high, according to two people that have inquired about his availability in recent days. Julius Randle, hey, more points than shots. That's the goal. 17 points on 7 of 14 shooting and 9 boards for the former All-Star. RJ Barrett with a quiet night, 11 points on 14 shots. But the Knicks bench once again comes up big. They got 14 from Quentin Grimes. And once again, this is just baffling to me. David, Obi Toppin scores 14 points in 18 minutes, is a plus 10, and only plays 18-32. Like, what does Toppin have to do to get on the floor? You watch him and you're like, Obi Toppin is awesome. Like, just absolutely awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I don't get it. I mean, I don't know where you take away those minutes, though. I mean, I guess it's just you've got Randall there. He takes up the bulk of the minutes. I mean, Mitchell Robinson, in theory, provides a little bit more in terms of his rim protection and things of that sort. But you got to find a place for Toppin. And then you make that strange move for Cam Reddish, who managed to actually play 5 minutes today. But there seems to be a glut there and somewhat aimless of a front office. I mean, they just, after a couple of years of being a very, very bad front office, they've made some good moves. And then now they kind of seem to be making some head scratchers as well there. I just don't get it. Look, this game at least showcased the Knicks' strong defense. We're able to kind of put a stranglehold on a really limited Sacramento team. Not able to capitalize for the free throw line. I'm looking at this. They went 11 of 22 from the line. Harrison Barnes, another big name in trade talks, 2 of 7 from the line there. So not a great game for him. They shot under 29% from 3-point range there. So tip your hat to the Knicks, who continue to do something on occasion. So why not?
You know, it's interesting. Usually the Knicks defensive style is to try and force turnovers. They want to apply a lot of pressure to you. The Kings were able to beat it, but they couldn't hit anything on the weak side. And I mean, some of it I thought was good closeouts by the Knicks, but in general, just a bummer of a performance from the Kings, who once again just seem to be going nowhere. Let's take a break. We'll come back and we will talk more about this slate of games tonight. We'll talk about the Raptors getting another big win. We'll talk about maybe the most surprising outcome of the night, and we'll talk about the Cavs squeaking one out as well. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On NBA. But first, David, can you tell our listeners and audience about TurboTax?
Absolutely. Look, we've all got unique lives, whether you're invested in crypto for the first time this year, or if you own an up-and-coming small business, or if you're raising rambunctious twins. Luckily, TurboTax Live has experts who can answer your tax questions. They'll walk you through the whole process, or they'll even do your taxes for you from start to finish, no matter your unique situation. To TurboTax Live experts, an interesting life can mean an even greater refund. So visit TurboTax.com to learn more. You do your thing, they've got your taxes. Intuit TurboTax Live. Go to TurboTax.com to learn more.
We're also brought to you by RockAuto.com. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock the parts that you need. So why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? Is that an LX or an SX or a BX or an MX or what? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry. You've got computers with access to RockAuto.com at home and in your pocket. You get to save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, sometimes even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every single customer, and they've got everything that you need, from brake parts to tail lamps to motor oil and even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution for your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Back here on Locked On NBA, thanks for making us part of your day and making us your first listen each and every day. We are free and we are available on all platforms. We'll let you know the NBA trade deadline Thursday, February 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern. And the Locked On NBA podcast will be covering it live from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Join Kim Becker, my guy John Corrales, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to get analysis of every blockbuster move. Subscribe to Locked On NBA YouTube and turn your notifications on so you know when they go live. Back here on Locked On NBA, David, the Atlanta Hawks have been on a
Mm.
roll lately. They have absolutely been terrific. However, they ran into a big obstacle tonight in the form of the Toronto Raptors, who every single time I think that this team is dead in the water, they come back. And every time I think this team is going to make a run, they start to slide. I don't know what to do with the Raptors, but they got a big win tonight.
They're great. I mean, having just seen them against the Heat this past weekend, they've been
That
a
was a
fun
great
team
game.
to watch. Yeah, that was a triple overtime. I mean, unbelievable. Great performance there by a potential All-Star candidate in Pascal Siakam. Nobody's talking about Gary Trent Jr., who's averaged over 30 points per game over the last few games since he came back from injury. He's just been phenomenal. He's just a dangerous weapon for them to have. They've got all these. I mean, everybody talks about the Cleveland Cavaliers and their unusual length and their big guys and everything else like this. The Raptors have it too. They've got a bunch of, incredibly athletic, switchable bigs that can guard multiple positions, as Scotty Barnes, Siakam, and OG Anunoby. I mean, they're a great team, and they've got great championship experience there with Fred VanVleet. Of course, Nick Nurse continues to do a really good job of keeping things interesting. So the Raptors, I mean, look, we can have this conversation since the Celtics won and they looked pretty dominant against the Heat as well. But of these teams towards the bottom end of the Eastern Conference standings, nothing seems assured, right? Like, I mean, everybody's been talking about the strength of the East, right? You've got Brooklyn, you've got Milwaukee, you've got Philadelphia, the Heat, etc. But the bottom rung teams there, the ones that are currently hovering around the 7 through 9 mark, they're pretty dangerous in their own regards. I don't know that you can write off either the Celtics or the Raptors completely yet, because they seem to have something unique about them and just enough experience on their end that could challenge any of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. Maybe I'm crazy, but I'm a believer in what the Raptors have put together this year.
I think if you're the Bulls, you don't want to see Toronto get, the 7 or 8 spot and go up
Right.
against them. I think if you're the Heat, you definitely don't want to see Toronto. They're just such a pain to deal
Yeah.
with. The play-in tournament right now would be Toronto. It would be Hornets versus Raptors for the 7. And then the
Yeah.
loser of that would face winner of Celtics Hawks. Like Hawks, Celtics, Raptors, Hornets. Your easiest option there is LaMelo Ball, Gordon Hayward, and a high octane offensive team in Charlotte. Like that's your
Yeah.
easy one. That's the
Yeah.
easy team there. A lot of depth in this Eastern Conference. This game,
Absolutely.
one thing that I think is notable is Toronto going to this. They've tightened the rotation, right? They are no longer playing like everybody. It's they went to a 9-man rotation tonight. Boucher, Achua, Champagne, and Banton play. And Siakam was, I thought, tremendous in this game on both ends of the floor. He's been getting a lot of people have been like, you gotta know Siakam. I'm calling out Siakam. He's been great. 25 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks, like 4 stocks for Siakam in this game. He was everywhere on that back line versus, that Hawks team. And I'll say this, like the Hawks team, I'm actually not surprised that the Raptors got the win here, because the problem with the Hawks, on top of the fact that I will say, like, no Trae Young, right? So the Hawks fans are just gonna be like, no Trae Young, and that's fair. Right. I think it's fair when he's the engine, but I still feel like this Hawks team has enough talent with Collins and Capella and Herter and all these guys to be able to do something, but they just can't get the stops. Like they just simply are so disconnected defensively, and against a team like Toronto that's so disciplined. That's how Gary Trent Jr. got he got quality shots all night long. And they get the win.
Yeah.
So here's a weird one. Okay. The Clippers are facing Indiana, and the Pacers in this nightmarish season are without Malcolm Brogdon, Miles Turner, Domantas Sabonis enters into health and safety protocols, so he's out. This is their starting 5 tonight. Justin Holiday, Torrey Craig, rookie Isaiah Jackson, Chris Duarte, and Karis LeVert. And Duarte goes 3 of 11 from the field.
Right.
And yet, the Pacers get the win over the Clippers. Now, the Clippers obviously without Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And then the big one, I think, honestly, here was that no Ivica Zubac. That was huge, because that opened the door. They had to start Ibaka, who actually won his minutes.
It was good.
But they were so short-handed, and they had to go small a little bit, and Jackson just went off.
Yeah, big game for him. Impressive showing. And then their backup was a rookie too, because no O'Shea Brissett. So they were definitely undermanned, and yet they were still able to beat this Clippers. I mean, I've talked about the Pacers before, and it's been hard to kind of get a read on them. I think I'm not alone in that regard.
I forgot that we're back here with you having to come up with trying to explain the Pacers on
Yeah,
Locked On NBA Tuesday.
yeah. But look, I mean, Marcus Morris Sr. Goes 4 of 14 from the floor, so that's a big problem right there. I don't think it was anything that the Pacers were able to do defensively. Just a bad game for him. Otherwise, the Clippers probably a good chance at coming back and finding a way to win this game. But, you tip your hat to a guy like Jackson who comes in there, starts in place of Sabonis and Turner and gets some incredibly productive minutes. 29 minutes, 12 of 19 for the floor, 26 points, 10 rebounds, and a steal and 2 blocks. So a great game for him, big overall performance. But yeah, Duarte, that was impressive to me. For him to go 3 of 11 with only 8 points and for the Pacers to somehow steal a victory, pretty impressive there.
Eric Bledsoe, 5 of 13 from the field, 1 of 6 from
Nice.
3, 13 points and a
Nice.
-12 in 23 minutes. Just rough stuff.
Yeah, Kennard also, he's been really good of late, and he was struggling, 1 of 7 from the floor. So a big part
They were
of the
also
Clippers loss.
clearly watching minutes though on the back-to-back too. You can tell that was
Yeah,
part of the Clippers whole deal here too as well.
yeah.
Finally, before we go to break, the Cavs sneak one out versus the Pelicans. They trailed this entire game. It was a slugfest. It was ugly. 93-90. This game was gross. It was absolutely gross. Jackson
Yeah,
Hayes had 19 points for the Pels. No Darius Garland for the Cavs. So their backcourt was Chetty Osman and Isaac Okoro next to
nice.
Dean Wade, and then Mobley and Allen. Rajon Rondo comes off the bench, and Kevin Love saves the day, essentially, is a +17, giving them 15 points and 11 boards, including 3 of 8 from 3-point range. Brandon Goodwin gave them awesome minutes. He was 8 of 11 from the field, 21 points. They needed somebody who could run guard, and so
Yeah,
Brandon Goodwin was very helpful in this game because they had nothing else. Jackson Hayes outplayed Evan Mobley. Jonas Valanciunas comes back for the Pelicans, but no Brandon Ingram. I will say the Cavaliers lost to the Pistons on Sunday,
yeah.
and they probably should have lost this one given how the game kind of played out. Like, they get out with the win, but as somebody that has been kind of like, hey, the Cavaliers are really good, I'm getting
Yep.
a little nervous that maybe the injuries are starting to be too much for him late in the season.
Well, I mean, you expect Garland's going to come back, right? And he's
Yeah.
been near All-Star form all season long, and I imagine that's probably not as big a concern there. But I mean, you get a night where Wade, Osman, Okoro, that deadly trio, goes combined 7 of 26 from the floor there. Wade 0 of 5, Osman 3 of 16. Not great. Luckily Okoro 4 of 5. Yeah, I don't know what to make of this one, to be honest with you. I think I'm reading a little bit more positively just because the Cavs, without Garland, were able to stage a late game comeback and outscore the Pelicans by 9 in that fourth quarter. So I think there's something positive to take away from this if you're a Cavs fan. On the Pels side, it's just another tough loss, unfortunately for them. But for the Cavs to be able to do so without your best offensive player, arguably, I think you find something positive and you say, you know what, we're building good vibes. We're building good habits that we can bank on later on the season when the team's a little bit more healthy.
Real quick before we go break, let me ask you, if you have one All-Star or All-NBA spot that you could give, and you had to give it to one of two guys, Darius Garland or Fred VanVleet, who gets it?
Oh, it's Siakam in it at this point?
No, it's a guard. It's one of the two guards.
I know, but I'm saying, but you want some Raptors representation there because I think they're deserving, and I think if you're going to choose a Raptor and Siakam gets in, that's fine, and I can see why VanVleet. I know that's kind of tough, right? The whole thing is so difficult to judge at this point. I got to go with VanVleet. I think he's just a little bit better defensively, so I have to say he is more deserving at this point in their careers, and Garland will have more opportunities down the road.
The fact that we're even in that conversation says a lot about where Garland's
Yes.
at, right? Like, that's a lot.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
a huge step forward.
Yeah.
Let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll wrap up the rest of the games here on Tuesday's Locked On NBA from Monday's slate. But first, I need to tell you about Bet Online. There might be less football being played, but betonline.net has way more odds and info for this playoff season. Scores, totals, playoff performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land. BetOnline is the #1 spot for all things NFL betting in 2022. Not just football. BetOnline.net's basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC odds coverage is the best in the business. From sports right down to your favorite Vegas casino games, BetOnline is your #1 wagering destination. BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports and play your favorite games. BetOnline, where the game starts. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms. Final segment here with David Ramil breaking down Monday night in the NBA. I'm Matt Moore. Thanks for joining us. 2 more games to wrap up, and let's start with the big offensive performance of the night. Steph Curry. Okay, here we go, David. So over the weekend, Steph has a good game, and I'm like, okay, maybe Steph's back. And he has a really awful game, and I'm like, oh, I guess that was just like a 1-game performance, and maybe Steph's not back. And then they face the Rockets, who are just what you need to get things right. Steph goes for 40, 13 of 23 shooting, 7 of 14 from 3, 9 assists, 5 boards, plus 18. Warriors roll over Houston. They got a great game from Andrew Wiggins, who had 23 points on 14 shots. Moses Moody started, which I'm very excited about. He had a good game, 11 on 4 of 7 shooting. I was very excited to see Moses Moody playing. I like Moses Moody a lot. Kevon, this Rockets team is just not in a great spot, and they just can't defend. Jalen Green, another rough night. 2 of the field, 0 of 2 from 3, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and a -19. Like, I can't believe Jalen Green's been this bad. I've really been surprised. I thought he would at least put up numbers. Alperen Şengün doesn't play enough than as he should. He should play way more. But I'll ask you, okay, we got 2 out of 3 really good Steph games. Steph back?
I think so. I think you see a player going through these kinds of slumps, and you assume that as long as he's healthy, there isn't anything too serious. I know there's been a lot of talk about him slumping, and then whether or not he was able to break out of that. To me, I don't know that he was ever in a real slump for a prolonged amount of time for where we could have any kind of legitimate concerns. He's Steph Curry. Like I think you always have to believe that he'll be able to find a way out of it. I don't think there's anything psychological, and there's nothing physical with him, at least not publicly disclosed, that I don't think there's any reason for concern. And when you see a game like this, yeah, I think you're certainly convinced that he's back 7 of 14 for 40 points. I mean, come on. Are you concerned that he's not back? Because I don't see it. I know the Houston Rockets certainly play a big part of that. But this game was a lot closer, right, than the final score would show. A 14-point semi-blowout there. But with 6 minutes left in the game, the Rockets were only down 4 and there on the cusp of stealing one against the Warriors. But, Curry comes up big as he often does.
He had a really big burst in the fourth quarter. Kerr didn't take him out when he usually takes Curry out and let him roll, and he racked up like 19 points. It was crazy. Like, he just rolled and got through it. You're right that they kind of hung in this game. One thing kind of note from this game, Kevin Porter Jr. decided to talk at Steph like a lot. Like, Kevin Porter Jr. was in Steph's ear, and Steph mostly just ignored him and then goes off for 40. And
questionable decision there.
Yeah, not great from Kevin Porter Jr. Not the best.
That's almost synonymous with Kevin Porter Jr. as questionable decisions. Is that right?
Yeah, questionable decision, Kevin Porter Jr. Final game of the night, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Nice. I don't know. Maybe this is more. Is this more or less surprising than the Cavs or the Pacers getting the win? I can't tell. The Blazers, no Damian Lillard, but they did have CJ McCollum and Norman Powell and Yusuf Nurkic, and should have won this game. And they just couldn't score because Anthony Simons had a bad night. His first bad night in what feels like forever. 3 of 16 from the field, 8 points on 16 shots for Ant. By the way, he should not be called Ant. His name's Anthony. That does not make any sense. 5 boards, 2 assists, but Simons was just rough from the field. Look, the Blazers went 7 of 38 from 3-point range, 18%. Could not hit water if they fell out of a boat. And to the Thunder's credit, I will say I thought the defense was really good. Nurkic put up numbers in this one, and probably like the fact that they were -22 with him having 14 points on 7 of 12 shooting against the Thunder. Like, Nurk needs to probably carry you a little bit more, especially if your 3-pointer is not falling. Like, I'm not necessarily a big fan of the whole, like, well, if your 3-pointer is not falling, you got to do something else. I think sometimes depending on the team, you got to stay who you are. But like the Blazers, like the Thunder don't have any bigs.
Yeah.
They don't have any bigs.
Right.
They're just huge. Let the man eat. You mentioned Gary Trent Jr. with a huge night tonight for the Raptors, 31 points. Norman Powell, 17 points on 6 of 15 shooting. Not what you want to see from Powell trying to step up. Like he has not been somebody that has carried them at all. McCollum was good, 21 points on 10 of 17, but the Blazers are never going to play good enough defense, right?
Yeah.
Like they're never going to play good enough defense. And if you don't shoot and you can't defend, that's how you lose to the Thunder.
Yeah, I look, that as egregious as that sub 19 shooting percentages from 3-point line, the fact that they only got 8 free throw attempts all game long. Oh man, there's just no ability to draw contact there. Nobody to slow the pace down in their favor. Just nothing. No clear identity with that Dame Lillard in the lineup there. And as good as a player as CJ McCollum is, just seems like it's pretty clear now that he is a very distant to Dame Lillard there. Does he get moved at the trade deadline? Because I know that's the biggest, or one of the biggest names I think most likely to get moved, or at least linked in trade talks there. But I just can't see a potential trade for him there. I know Blazers fans don't even want to hear about the possibility of breaking up that duo, but it just seems like he's never going to be able to reach whatever potential he can be as a great second string player. He's just not going to be able to find his footing in Portland, at least not in my opinion. Do you think he gets moved before the trade deadline?
So I reported this last week that there has not been a significant offer yet for Powell. There just hasn't been, or not for Powell, for CJ. There just hasn't been. There just hasn't been anything major. There is a kind of a feeling in some circles I've talked to that if he goes anywhere, it's going to be New Orleans. That's like the most likely team, is that they've got the trade assets from the Lakers that they can, that Portland would be interested in. Maybe send like a young player and a pick or two, and CJ goes to New Orleans. And then the idea is like you kind of reconfigure the backcourt around, like, so when Zion comes back, you're able to say like, hey, we've got veterans that are ready to compete and win right now. But
I like that move.
The problem is there's just not like much of a market, from my understanding. Is like there's just not teams that are like, ooh yeah, CJ. So which is weird, because I think CJ is still really good and can help a lot of teams, but there hasn't been like a really robust market. I think Covington probably gets moved. I don't like. I would be a little surprised if Covington was still on Blazers roster after the deadline. And then the other names are Nurkic and Powell, and I think there's probably like a 50-50 chance on both of those guys. With CJ, I'm honestly closer to 50% than I thought I'd be, just based off of the fact that I haven't heard anything. Like it's not like, oh, this team has kicked the tires on it. There just hasn't been anything of real substance to kind of generate. So as of right now, I don't know how this is going to go with. Blazers, it kind of looked like they were maybe gaining some momentum. This was a bad loss. We'll see what happens with 10 days left until the deadline.
Yeah, the Thunder ending a 7-game losing streak against the hapless Portland Trailblazers. So not a good momentum builder before the trade deadline there, to be sure.
Sam Presti hates to see that. Hates to see that, breaking up that losing streak. That's going to wrap it up for Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Make sure to check us out on YouTube, subscribe, like, especially for that trade deadline show. Check that out. Give us those 5-star reviews. You can follow David on Twitter at DRamil13. I'm on Twitter at HB Basketball. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On NBA.